Long time no see, guys. It's Mrs. Klein.
How's it going? It's Mrs. Wolbrin.
We're here today for the second podcast in this new book that we've been trying out here. This particular lesson is called From Different Countries. Okay, you can probably think of a time when you were assigned a tough or a boring task that you didn't want to do. For some immigrants, only the hardest, lowest paid work was available when they arrived in their new country. The main idea for this lesson, you guys, is many immigrants came to the United States to escape food shortages and political conflicts in their home countries.
Now, your vocabulary is going to be famine, blight, domestic service, and assimilate.
Okay, the first section is escaping disease and poverty. Okay, between the 1830s and 1860s, Irish immigrants represented the largest number of newcomers to the United States. Most were poor farmers who had no opportunities to improve their lives in their homeland. For centuries, Britain had claimed sovereignty over Ireland, and many of the Irish were dissatisfied with the oppression of British rule. To make matters worse, the country was experiencing widespread starvation due to the Great Irish Famine. A famine is an extreme shortage of food. From 1845 to 1852, a plant disease called blight killed the country's entire potato crop. The famine was made worse by the system of farming imposed by the British, because British landlords took what little food the Irish were able to farm. Approximately 1 million people died before the famine was over. For these reasons, or push factors, Irish immigrants came to the United States in record numbers.
Now, what we have here, we've got an image that we want to do. I like what they call this in this book, a critical viewing. And I want you to look at this. And in 1850, British artist Frederick Goodall painted an Irish eviction. He drew upon his experience of traveling in Ireland during the famine. Landlords, eager to rid their lands of destitute laborers and farmers, evicted hundreds of thousands of families. What details in Goodall's painting capture the despair of evicted tenants during the famine?
Wow.
Yeah, there's a lot of details.
A lot of details in that painting, absolutely, that are going to tell a story without, again, having to read a word. Exactly. Just be looking at the image. All right, so opportunities for jobs and new beginnings were pull factors for many Irish immigrants. American business owners recruited Irish immigrants because they would work for lower wages than many American workers. While skilled workers such as carpenters or bakers could earn adequate wages, most Irish men were unskilled. They found jobs building railroads, digging canals, and loading cargo onto ships. The work was difficult, dangerous, and paid the lowest wages. For Irish women, unskilled labor meant domestic service or housework in another person's home. Maids and kitchen servants received about $1 a day in 1870, which was better pay than most factories offered. Plus, domestic service often included food and housing.
British immigrants didn't flee from famine, but they did hope to escape from the rigid British class system. Just as in Irish society, few opportunities existed for British farmers to avoid living in poverty. From their perspective, owning inexpensive and fertile American land was a chance at a whole new and likely better life.
When they arrived in the United States, most British and Irish immigrants wanted to assimilate or become part of their new country. But they also held on to their culture and traditions. In the neighborhoods where they lived close to each other, they formed groups and clubs and attended community dances, meals, and church services together. Preserving and maintaining many of their customs and traditions offered a relief from the strain of assimilation.
Next section, moving to the Midwest. Poverty and hunger were not the only push factors. Civil unrest or open conflict within a society also encouraged people to leave. For example, in the middle of the 19th century, areas in Germany experienced a series of revolutions. As a result, many Germans fled to the United States.
German immigrants differed in some ways from other groups of immigrants. One difference was that Germans held diverse religious beliefs. Also, unlike those who came to escape poverty and famine, many German immigrants were not poor and did not have to travel in steerage. They could afford to continue traveling after they arrived in the country, oftentimes choosing to settle in the farmland between present-day states of Nebraska and Minnesota. So many of them settled in this region, in fact, that the area became known as the German Belt.
Especially after the 1860s, immigrants from Sweden, Norway, and Denmark joined the Germans in the upper Midwest. The population of Sweden was growing, farmland was scarce, and the same potato blight that hit Ireland struck Sweden around 1868. Some Swedes and other Scandinavian immigrants sought land in the United States. Others came for the growing number of well-paid factory jobs in the Midwestern cities such as Chicago and Minneapolis. Immigration increased the population and enriched the culture of the United States, but not all Americans welcomed the newcomers.
All right, I'm just, as on a personal note, you guys, that's when my family came from Norway in the 1870s. So on my mom's side of the family, they came in, and the real deal is that the oldest son is the one who was going to inherit the family property, and there were too many children, and there wasn't going to be property, and so they came a couple at a time. But eventually, all of my grandmothers, like her mom and dad and like their siblings who were not the oldest in the family, all came and they immigrated. They came in through New York, and then they made their way to Minnesota, where they got very cheap land. And so that's, that's not just my story. That's the story of millions of people who end up coming. But my grandma, even when she was a little kid going to school, was taught in Norwegian, because there were so many Norwegians who lived in that particular area of Minnesota. So
that's so interesting. You're so lucky to know that, because I feel like so many families have lost their history on how they came to America.
Yeah, it's a really cool thing. My mom has a couple cousins who have done great big family trees and histories and things like that. So actually, I have pictures that show, my great grandparents. Then it was their stamped passports and things like that coming into the United States, coming through Ellis Island. So it's a treasure. I'm happy to know that kind of stuff.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right, you guys, you should be able to answer a couple of questions. What factors prompted people to emigrate from their home countries? And in addition to that, what kinds of choices could wealthier immigrants make once they arrived in the United States? And not everybody had the opportunity to be able to do. All right, you guys, so long, suckers.
And we're logging off.